Okay, so we are live now. My name is Shanice Pimentel. That is spelled with an E-L at the end and not an A-L, as commonly mistaken, and a lot of emails get lost that way. I am the neighborhood coordinator and constituency liaison for Back Bay, Beacon Hill, Fenway, Kenmore, and Mission Hill for the office of Martin J. Walsh, that is our mayor. You can find my email address here, shanice.pimentel@boston.gov, and my phone number listed here. Those are both ways that you can communicate with me about this community process or about anything else. So let's quickly go through the guidelines for the participation. So the agenda, we're going to, as I mentioned, go through the guidelines and the CBA process. We'll do a brief introduction and presentation of the proposal. And then if you guys could use the written Q&A throughout the presentation, that would be helpful to help us navigate any questions and concerns that you may have. However, we will have time for verbal feedback at the very end. So the guidelines for participation goes as follows. We ask that you engage respectfully at all times. Disruptive behavior will not be allowed and you will be removed from the meeting. The applicants will present their proposal, then we will devote the remainder of the time to feedback. We encourage the use of Q&A, as I mentioned, unless there is an issue of accessibility to better navigate questions, comments, and or concerns. We will go through the Q&A first and then allow time for spoken feedback. But feedback will be limited to 2 minutes per person to allow as many people to share their thoughts. This meeting will end promptly at 7 p.m. I cannot control that. It will end, so I will try to give you guys a 10-minute warning. But please do be considerate of everybody's time and try not to be too repetitive of the questions and concerns that have already been addressed. Again, if you still have any, if you would like further detail on anything that is discussed, you can definitely connect with me and I can connect you with the applicants so that you can continue the discussion, and that is also considered a part of the community process. This is only one part of the community process, but the community process you can participate in the community process in many different ways, including any written and verbal conversations with myself and the zoning board. So as of right now, this proposal does not have a ZBA hearing date. This is just the first part, and then they are required to communicate with the community groups before they do receive a hearing date. The community process is open up until the date of the hearing. And that is all for the guidelines. Then here are just some, information as to how to navigate the program. So when you join as an attendee, your microphone will be muted automatically and you will not have the ability to turn on your camera. The menu at the bottom of the screen will have different icons for microphone, participants, Q&A, and more to lead the event. If you can't hear, just check these, phone icon, and then at the very top says communicate. You can also try that. To give testimony, raise your hand or comment in the chat, and then I will unmute you. I will call your name, and then you will be allowed to participate and ask your questions or state your concerns or comments. If you're connected by telephone, if you press *3, you can raise your hand, and I will see that, and I will be able to unmute you, and you will hear 2 beeps when you are taken off of mute, but I will also try to call your name. I know I can't always see who is on calling in by phone, but we will try our best to navigate that. Okay. With that said, I am going to go ahead and put the slides on the screen, and we will pass it over to you, Mike and Guy. Okay?
Okay. Thank you, Shanice.
No problem.
Hello, everyone. My name is Mike Ross. Good to be with you in this strange new world that we are navigating. So I'm the attorney on the project, and Guy Grassi is on the telephone. He's having some technical issues, but he's going to walk through the project in a moment. That we'll kind of help him walk through it. This project is for the Lowrys, who I believe are also on the phone, Cindy and Seth, or at least one of them, and I think they are in the middle of moving one of their kids into school, And so they're taking time out to participate in this. Cindy and Seth are traveling eastward to move into our city. The goal here is to take a three-family building in the Back Bay at 4 Marlborough Street and convert it to a one-family building for the Lowry family, as it once was. I saw Tom High was on the phone, and I read Tom High's amazing, description of the building as he has on the database, and that's the goal here. So to do those things, they hired Guy Grassi, the architect, who's done a lot of work in the Back Bay, and there are a couple of elements to the design that trigger zoning violations, which often happens when there's a gut renovation of this level. And so there were three violations, and those violations, I just want to really kind of quickly walk you through what they are, and then maybe we'll have Guy kind of walk through the building as well. So the first one is height, and let me just say these are kind of technical zoning violations. I've been doing this for a while now, and I wasn't sure if we were going to get anything other than groundwater. That groundwater is triggered almost on every project in the Back Bay, so that's one of the three. The height, the reason why I didn't think we would necessarily get the height was because we're not going any higher than the existing project, and we're actually decreasing the massing of the top floor, of the fifth floor, or the penthouse unit, which will, not penthouse unit, but the roof deck unit, which we'll show you in a moment. It's shrinking, by maybe about, I don't know, about 20% or so, 30%, 20%. And so the fact that it was shrinking, it was an argument that maybe it wouldn't have thrown off a height violation, but it did. It threw off a height violation because the theory being that any work being done above the 65-foot height, and we're only talking about 2.5 feet really, but any work being done, any square inch that's new would trigger that height violation. So the first violation is height, and the second violation is the rear yard setback. Similarly, the rear yard setback, we're not increasing or decreasing the setback. We're going to where the existing setback is. We're doing so we can allow our car or the cars to actually get into the building and be parked in the basement of this building. So the new design will allow for several cars, Guy will talk to that, to be able to park into the building. And to do that, we needed to just a little bit square off the edges of the rear of the building, which triggered that rear yard setback violation. Again, we're not increasing the setback violation, but we are, in terms of a new number, getting further setback or lesser setback, but we are adding to the area of that setback, and therefore that triggered the setback. And the third, as I mentioned, is groundwater. Interestingly, we're reducing the FAR of the building, so there was no FAR violation. We're going from a 3.5 to a 3.18. So the living space is decreasing, and that's due to the fact that we're actually creating that's due to the fact that the parking is being brought into the building. So that's kind of like the broad brushstrokes. We do have a meeting scheduled with the Neighborhood Association of the Back Bay's Architectural Commission on September 1 at 6:30 p.m. So we will be going to that meeting as well. I think, Guy, I kind of gave you the broad brushstrokes. Did you want to kind of speak a little bit to the rear of the building, the garage, and the top of the building?
Yeah, sure. I can. Hi, this is Guy Grassi. I'm sorry I can't be on the Zoom presentation or the GoToMeeting. I'm not able to download it for some reason or get on it. The building is it's a great townhouse, and it'll make a great single family. It was renovated, 10 years ago by an individual who made 3 condominium units out of it, but held them, never sold the 3, and rented them. And so the conversion is a renovation to a building that was recently renovated. The penthouse, the top floor, this partial top floor, was added on at that time. And what we're proposing to do up there is to cut away the forward section of it, the Marlborough Street side or portion of that, but reconstruct a small.
I'm sorry, Guy. If Shanice, if you could just go to the top of the building view, I guess maybe slide 5, I think. Sorry, Guy. I want to make sure that. 5. What slide
you would see it on drawing A3.
A3. Do you know what number slide it is for deck?
It should be the 3rd drawing.
Is that it?
Yeah. If you look at the 5th floor plan, the middle, kind of that middle floor there that says 5th floor.
Correct. 5th floor.
You'll see that there's some.
And what you'll see there's a deck on the right-hand side, a roof deck, and that's an existing deck that's up there. There's a dotted line that sort of bisects that deck. That is the current location of the front wall of the penthouse. So we're pushing back the front wall by removing a section of the penthouse. And then when you go towards the rear of the penthouse, you'll see another dashed line that runs through what looks to be sort of a wet bar area or a kitchen area. And then there's about a 4-foot extension, 3.5 feet, I think is what it is, going on. They were proposing to the rear part of the penthouse. So we're essentially shifting the penthouse towards the rear and reducing it in size. It's no higher than what's up there. We are proposing an elevator shaft to extend up above the roof. That is excluded from the building height by the zoning code, so that's why that's not in there, but there is a projection up on the roof that doesn't require zoning relief. And obviously all of this, if we get approved at the ZBA, will still need to go through the rigorous Back Bay Architectural Commission application and discussions and presentations and approvals. So this is just for the zoning violations. The other issue is the rear yard setback.
Did you want to show the elevation at all on the next slide, just quickly?
Yeah, sure. Shanice, if you can do that. There's a colored version of it. I don't know if you were able to get that in the presentation.
Is it this?
Yeah. Although the other one might give us a little more. That is a prettier version for sure, but the other one might give us more detail, guide, dash line in there. You may want to describe that.
Are we talking about the building section, drawing A4? Okay.
That's right.
That's a good drawing to look at to sort of segue into the next part. But it does show the location of the penthouse and the dashed lines of where the penthouse was and will be, and the visibility of it, which is an important consideration. But again, that's more of an architectural commission issue. The other aspect of this was we would like to square off the rear bay at the ground floor at the rear so that we can introduce the garage door. And again, as Mike said, we're not extending the building closer to the rear property line except underground. And that underground portion of it is not subject to the rear yard setback. It's actually an exception. So that you can build an underground encroachment into the rear yard up to, I think it's 5 feet above grade. And we're not going all the way to the rear property line, and we're not going above grade. So it won't be visible from the outside, but we are proposing to build underground towards the alley line. But again, that's not subject to the zoning variance. But the two parts of the rear of squaring off the angled bay, and we're also proposing to add 2 stories and extend that rear bay up 2 levels. Currently, it ends at the 2nd floor, and we're proposing to extend that bay up to the 4th floor. Both of those, squaring off the bay and adding the 2 levels of the bay, are technical violations of the rear yard setback because about 1.5 feet of it is actually within the rear yard setback. So the bay that's out there from the ground up to the 2nd floor is currently in violation of the rear yard setback. The building adjacent to us to the west goes all the way out to the alley line. So it's not uncommon to see that, an existing building in violation, but the addition of any space does need to conform according to the zoning code. So those are the two major violations. The third item was the G-cod. And this is an unusual one because I haven't worked on one of these yet where someone had already gone through the G-cod process and obtained. I don't know if you're all familiar with that process, but it's basically the city requires now I forget what's it called, Mike, a special permit. Letter? Well, no, it's the conditional use permit. So it's not a variance.
Article 32 G-cod.
Right. So what the city did was added this section to the zoning code that requires that an applicant that's doing any kind of extensive renovation that exceeds 50% the value of the building, or has an excavation below elevation 7, which is essentially into the groundwater, obtain a conditional use permit from the ZBA. We are exceeding the 50% rule, and we're also we're not sure yet, but we're most likely going to be excavating below into the groundwater just slightly for this car lift that we're proposing to put inside the building. And you can see that a bit in the cross-section. It looks like we're going to be about 1.5 feet into the groundwater, so it'll take some very minor dewatering to install that. For all of these reasons, we need to get a conditional use permit from the ZBA. One of the requirements of this is to provide a no-harm letter. We have a geotechnical engineer we'll be using on this who will monitor the dewatering and who will provide the no-harm letter. And it'll go to Chris Simonelli at the Groundwater Trust. And obviously his blessing is required for the ZBA to sign off on it. So we'll be working with Chris on this to make sure he's okay with what we're doing and how we do it. The interesting thing is that this building had already gotten a groundwater overlay district conditional use permit 10 years ago, and the recharge tanks, which is what essentially is the remedy for all of this for this kind of work, has already been installed. The recharge tanks basically take rainwater that rains across the site, collects it all, and puts it into a tank that allows it to percolate into the groundwater, and then that groundwater, then you effectively are recharging the groundwater and making sure the piles aren't damaged because of low groundwater levels, or at least it helps to maintain the groundwater levels. That recharge system is installed. We're going to move it slightly because of the garage extension and then reinstall it. But all of that needs to get approval from the Boston Water and Sewer Commission, and we're in the process of applying to them to do that, to get that approval, and that'll also be contingent before we can get the ZBA approval. Other than that, there's a general renovation of the building going on, exterior restoration work, replacement of some certain parts and pieces. We're proposing a fence in the front yard. One substantial improvement, I think, to the building that, again, doesn't require zoning approval, but the Lowrys would like to do, is to remove the side entrance, which is basically a basement-level entrance that's alongside the stoop. We've looked at historic photos and discovered that side basement entrance was never there originally, and it was added at some point. And when you look at it carefully, you can see that it wasn't original stonework, and there's been it was decently done, but it wasn't an original feature. So our proposal is to actually reconstruct what was there historically, originally. Interestingly, there was a door that was installed in the center window of the bay at the basement level. We have an old photo of that, which is kind of interesting. And again, that was not original either. That's been repaired at some point in time, not sure when. But again, all of these other features, the fence around the front yard, the landscaping, all that stuff will be subject to the Architectural Commission hearing. So it's probably not worth going through all that here.
Just round out what you had to say, Guy. The elevation page we're on right now. If people look at the right-hand side of the building, which is the rear of the building, you'll see how that bay that Guy was talking about is extended. An additional story, Guy, or 2 additional stories?
2 additional stories. It's interesting. This is a twin building with the building to the east, and the building to the east has a 3-story bay, basement, at the ground floor level, the first and the second. This building, for some reason, only had it at the ground and the first. We're proposing to add 2 levels to it, the second and the third floor of bay, basically matching all of the brickwork and copper detailing and all that, and bringing it right up to the mansard level.
And then just to maybe round out this presentation, if you, Shanice, if you want to go to just to page 1, it's a better detail to show the, yeah, there you go. So this is the basement. The sub-basement is the lower level, and then at the bottom of this drawing is the basement. And if you look kind of in front of where the car is there and to where the lift is, that's where you'll see kind of the squared off section that's kind of a little bit darker, where the entrance of the garage is itself. That little bit there is the addition to allow the car to go into that garage. I would say it's all of, I don't know, 2 feet on each side or something like that. That was added to allow for the squaring off of the rear of the building to allow for the car to enter. So I hope everyone can see that too. I think maybe that's a good place to stop and answer any questions.
Cool. Let me just check what's going on.
Hi, it's Jesse Baker. Can I ask a question? Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Oh, okay. So I'm at 8 Marlborough, and I have a similar car lift. I did not add underneath the rear yard like they're proposing here. But at my house, we were able to check the groundwater depth by digging, and then we adjusted the elevator, the height of the car elevator, so that we would not need to get into the groundwater. So I don't remember what the actual height ended up being, but it's plenty to stand in and to park a car in it, and to lower a car into the basement level, or subgrade level, I guess you would call it. Have they checked the depth of the groundwater there and checked to see if they could do this without dewatering?
I mean, thank you for that. And obviously, the last thing we want to do is have to get into the groundwater. It's a costly exercise to go through. You need Department of Environmental Management permits, and there's processes and systems you got to go through to do this. Not to mention the cost of geotechnical engineers and all that business. So, if we can avoid it in any way, we would. The groundwater essentially varies in this area from anywhere between elevation 5 and elevation 8, and it varies seasonally. The pile cutoffs historically were around elevation 6. So, and we see some buildings that are elevation 5 and some at 6. So the groundwater is fairly stable between those heights, but and like this time of year, we oftentimes see the groundwater go down to elevation 5. We're probably excavating down to about elevation 6. We're trying to minimize it as much as we can. The part of the deal is to get the parking under the backyard, and to do that, we have some sort of rocks and hard places we have to get through. We're only parking 3 cars down there, so we're going through a lot to be able to do this. But we'll do as minimal an excavation as we possibly can, and impact the groundwater, temporarily. as minimally as we can, I guess, is the only answer I can say. What happens here is that we have to go through a process with there's a couple different companies that make these systems. So once we have a zoning approval and then get architectural commission approval, we would then go through a design process, an engineering process, working with the companies or with a company that provides these systems. There's a couple of them. The one we've used in the past is in Germany. It's actually in Holland, but they're owned by a German company. And you can't engage them until you actually sign the contract, and then they go through engineering, and then you actually know the exact depth of the pit for the lift system and what those what those requirements are. So we won't know the exact depth of the excavation until we go through that whole engineering process with this equipment company. Unfortunately, we have to go through this process and sort of explain what the depths of the excavations are now, but we're really not ready to give a firm number. So we're saying we're going to go below elevation 7 just so we don't get into trouble with anybody, committing to something that we then can't do later. I just had that problem at 29 Commonwealth Avenue, and I don't want to do it again. So we're trying to be careful and cautious here.
And what about, so by moving the recharge wells, you're moving them away from the actual foundation of number 4 and farther out towards the back of number 6. Doesn't that sort of reduce some of the structural stability of having the water recharge at the rear of the building?
I'm not sure what you mean by the structural stability. The tanks are designed to carry the loads of cars. They're what they call H2 loading, so they're engineered to be able to handle the weight of cars driving on them and the earth loads imposed upon them. We have space in the backyard to move these tanks to do that. So there isn't any structural concern with relocating them.
I meant that because you're moving the tanks, the recharge tanks, farther away from the foundation of the building, because you're putting in that car space underneath the rear setback.
Right.
Haven't you effectively pulled water away from the pilings that are at the rear of the house?
Oh, the water that comes out of the tanks disperses. It doesn't stay in one place. The idea of the recharge tanks is simply to stop doing what's been done for the last 100 years, which is to pave over all of these rear yards and repipe all of the downspouts and drains from the roofs and send the water to the Deer Island treatment plant. That's essentially what's been going on for the last 100 years. And so, as these buildings get connected up to the sewers, all the rainwater lands on these sites essentially goes to the treatment plant and doesn't go back into the ground. So the purpose of the tank is just to take that rainwater and put it back into the groundwater. Once it gets there, it moves all over the place. That water will run to Commonwealth Avenue. It'll run to the Charles River. There's no containing it. It's sort of like it's almost like a sea of water down there. Depending on the soil type, it sort of moves more slowly, migrates through the soil type. If there's more clay in it, it slows down the movement, but there's sort of no containing it, in that sense.
Okay. Just for your reference, my car elevator was made by a company called AutoQuip, AUTOQUIP, and they're out of the Midwest, and I've had no problems with it for 12 years.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thanks. I'm all set.
Thank you, Jesse. If anybody else would like to speak, there is a feedback button. It kind of looks like a horn or a speakerphone. You can also use the chat and the Q&A so that I know to unmute you. I think we can give participants another 5 minutes, but if there are no more questions or concerns, then we can wrap up the meeting, okay? Hey, Sue.
Hi.
Hi.
I finally found the right button.
There you go.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to the presentation on the first. You're more than welcome to come, Shanice, if you want.
Absolutely.
I think my main concern is with the groundwater issue, and I wonder how wedded the owners are to having 3 cars in the city. Would it be, because it seems like it would be much simpler if they would just do 2 and you could do it at on one level.
Understood. You know, we've had that conversation. This is very important to them. They have several children. They have, you know, they really do want this. So it's going to be a very expensive proposition to do all this. So they're quite aware of, you know, the costs and the time and the effort to do it all. So yeah, the answer is yes. They really do want the 3 cars. And we think it's an improvement, you know, being able to keep the cars inside. You know, we show a car outside because there'll be occasionally, you know, someone that parks out there, a visitor, you know, that they don't want to have go through the process of getting into the car system. But it's not intended to be a permanent parking space. It's just for sort of guests or that sort of thing.
Do they have enough depth outside of the bay?
Yes.
So they're not overhanging the sidewalk?
Oh, yeah. No, there's plenty of room.
Okay. All right. Well,
Thank you, Sue.
Be an interesting meeting. Thank you.
Okay, and I didn't see anybody else that wanted to participate or had any questions or concerns. So I think we can wrap this meeting up. Again, if you did have some difficulties, which may very well be the case, please do get in contact with me. I'll go back to the slide, which has both my email and my phone. So again, Shanice.pimentel@boston.gov, 617-635-2679. You can also find this information at boston.gov. And with that being said, I think we can conclude this meeting. Do you guys have any final comments, Mike or Guy?
No, thank you for everyone's time. We look forward to NAB, and then we look forward to the Zoning Board of Appeal and Back Bay Architectural Commission and all that comes, you know, all the process that comes with it.
Absolutely. And just a reminder, you are more than welcome to participate in the community process up until this proposal's hearing date, which is not scheduled at the time. So please do feel free to reach out to me if you want to have further discussion on this. All right.
Thank you, everyone.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
You too.
Bye now.
Bye.